Well, good evening, everybody in the Soothkeep family. We're going to have an amazing live stream tonight. We've got Brandon Holthaus in assembly here with us. He's going to be part of our conversation tonight on what's going on in Israel. We do want to touch on the conspiracy theory aspects of Israel and even maybe some other conspiracy theory aspects. Folks, this conspiracy theory stuff is really putting holes in the bottom of the boat. And when Israel is the focus of Bible prophecy in the last days, we do not want to have conspiracy theories attached to that. That's bad news. Well, anyway, Brandon, welcome to the program tonight. If there's anyone in the audience that's not familiar with you, why don't you give yourself a brief introduction?
Sure. Hey, thanks, Lee, for having me. This is, I think, our second time coming together on your show. I head up a ministry called Rock Harbor Church. I am the senior pastor of Rock Harbor, and been in the prophecy world for, 25, 30 years, somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't know. And one of the things that the Lord inspired me to do when we started Rock Harbor is to make sure that we emphasize prophecy, we emphasize current events in light of biblical prophecy, because that's one of the problems today is the churches are silent on all the issues, it seems like, especially, prophecy. So anyway, I've been doing that, and now, come in contact with folks like yourselves and other ministries, and we're starting to really now get a grasp of the remnant leadership in the prophecy world, especially, and you're one of them, obviously, and that's how we're meeting and coming together. And so, that's a little brief history on myself. I came out of a Catholic background. I got saved when I was 19, so later in life. But what actually pulled me into accepting Christ was prophecy. I was listening to Dr. David Jeremiah. This was 30, 40 years ago. Preaching through the book of Revelation. And I was listening to that as a Catholic, and it was just intriguing. And obviously it caught my attention. He gave a gospel presentation in one of his messages, and I got saved through that. So prophecy's always been on my heart. So, yeah.
Amen. Now, here's an introductory thought I would like to start our conversation off tonight with. I have noticed that there is a correlation between having a heart for Bible prophecy, for eschatology, and having a biblical worldview. Have you seen this correlation yourself?
Man, you hit the nail on the head, and you're connecting some good dots, because I noticed that, obviously prophecy is 1/3 of the Bible, and then and basically it forewarns us and tells us what's going to happen. And what that does is gives us a new insight that most people don't have. It's kind of insider insight, obviously coming from God, about how the world will go and how it will proceed. And then what we're to do is look for the patterns, look for the trajectory. And there's no doubt when you do that, it automatically creates a worldview that would, like, for instance, as an example, I would be resistant, and you would be resistant, and prophecy students would be resistant to a globalist government.
That's right.
Whereas if you do not know that about prophecy, your worldview might encompass globalism. You might think that's a good thing, or just be neutral on it and not realize how satanic that actually is and where that's heading to. And as an example, or the pluralism of the whore of Babylon and what she's going to do to bring a supra religion of tolerance and whatnot. And you might, if you're not aware of the whore of Babylon, what she's going to do as the governments of the world hold her up as the glue that unites the governments of the world, you might be inclined to be more like these. You hear these Laodicean Christians be, well, hey, we all just need to drop our theological distinctives and unite and come together and sing Kumbaya. And Lee, you've heard a lot of that. Well, you guys are just being too rigid on your theology. And it's like, no, that's the whore. So those two examples are just something that just comes to my head right away, that knowing prophecy actually creates a biblical worldview. No doubt about that, man. You hit the nail on the head.
Another interesting thought that I've had is that you really actually undermine the gospel if you focus only on the first coming, which purchases redemption, and you leave the second coming out, which God delivers his redemption to his people. Maybe you can comment on this for a minute.
Oh man. Well, I mean, think about it. I mean, the word revelation, it comes from the Greek apocalypse. That's where we get the word apocalypse, the revealing of the Messiah, and what is being revealed, the second coming, and what he's going to do, how the king is going to come back and rule and reign. But then what does he do? He brings justice, he brings deliverance, and he brings resurrection and regeneration, obviously, of things. And when you miss that part of the Messiah and you focus on the first coming, but not the second coming, you're missing a whole load of information that has been revealed about the Messiah. And so to Christians' detriment, when you have a pastor or a church that says, well, we refuse to teach the book of Revelation. Well, you're refusing to teach information about Jesus. Come on now. And that information is what God wants us to know about the Lord as he comes back as the Lion of the tribe from the tribe of Judah, and to rule and reign and get rid of Israel's enemies and God's enemies, basically. And you're not getting the full picture of the Messiah, and that's unfortunate. But Lee, it's the same thing that you hear today, where God is all love, but then there's no justice, right? And it's picking and cherry picking, I guess you want to call it, what they like about Jesus. But don't pick this part about Jesus when he comes back and actually melts people in Zechariah chapter 14. He liquefies people, and obviously it creates a 200-mile square pool of blood as high as the horse's bridle. I've heard people even say, well, that's not my Jesus. I said, oh my Lanta, not your Jesus. That's predicted in scripture what Jesus will do to his enemies. You have to bring that into your Christology.
That's right.
You can't take that out of your Christology. So yeah, prophecy helps balance things. I've noticed in theology. And if you don't want to include prophecy, you're going to be imbalanced in a lot of your other theologies.
I've certainly observed in the last few years that almost without exception, the people I know that are the solidest in their theology, the most balanced in their theology, are the ones that have made prophecy a serious part of their theological system, their ministry, their teaching, and their encouragement.
You're making a good point. And why is that? Well, I think it has to do with not only searching the scriptures, coming to piece together prophecy. There's no doubt it takes a certain level of maturity to be able to sift through the scriptures, because it's not all laid out as nice as we'd like it. It's piecemeal, and we're piecing things together and using obviously the chronology of Revelation and some of Daniel, obviously, to piece this out. But it takes a certain amount of hard work and study to do that. Now, here's the key where I'm going with this. In order to do that kind of study, you have to have your hermeneutic figured out.
That's right.
And I'm telling you, that's why I think, to your point, when you talk about people being in prophecy, being some of the most balanced in their theologies, it's due to the hermeneutic that has to be employed in order to make this all work. Because at any point where you spiritualize it or allegorize the text and not take it in the intended meaning, the literal, grammatical, syntactical, historical analysis of hermeneutics, the minute you don't do that, you're off. You're off immediately, and you're off in a big way. And so what I have learned through studying prophecy, these 25, 30 years of it, is really, it comes down to your hermeneutic. And a sound hermeneutic, which
Amen.
then filters out into the rest of your theology, whether you're dealing with, bibliology, anthropology, harmontology, or whatever, it balances that out. And it prevents you from spiritualizing or allegorizing things.
Amen. Well, here's the question that we were working towards. We had an event happen just over a week ago. Saturday morning, October 7th, one of the greatest tragedies in Israel's modern history.
Yeah.
Why don't you just give us a brief run through of what happened?
Boy, howdy. And you're right. It's on the level. This is not a terrorist insurrection or anything like we're used to seeing. This is on the level of kind of a 6-day war, Yom Kippur, that type of historical thing where Israel has now declared war. And obviously Hamas has went in and we now understand with Iran backing, Iran actually coordinated the events back in August, and Iran's a lot of what's behind a lot of this. But anyway, Hamas went in there and started attacking civilians and broke through the fence line, the border line, went into civilian areas and just literally murdered people, cold-blooded civilians, decapitated babies, burned people alive, raped women, took hostages. I think there's about 200 hostages still that Hamas has. And the death toll went into the thousands. And I don't even know right now what the current death toll is, but it's in the thousands now. And it keeps going higher and higher. And this was unprovoked. This is just flat out from their anti-Semitism of Hamas and Islam, and this perpetual hatred from the descendants of Ishmael and Esau that Ezekiel predicts. And so they went in and they did this. Now, so what's getting ready to happen is Israel has Gaza fenced off, and they have about 300,000 reservists now descending on this area, and they're going to go in there and extract Hamas and kill every one of Hamas and wipe them out. Now, the thing that's happening right now is the international world and is getting on to Israel saying, hey, man, you can't kill civilians. Don't be doing this, yada, yada, yada. But people have to take a step back and understand Israel's going to do its best not to hurt civilians. Like, they get that. But it's war. It's war. And in any war, historically, you're going to have civilian casualties. Because here's the problem. Hamas uses human shields. One of their bases right now that I've heard the latest is one of their headquarters or little hideouts or whatever is right under the hospital in Gaza. So what is Israel supposed to do? You know what I mean? And Israel's going to work around that as best they can. But Israel flies leaflets. They make phone calls and they say, hey, we're going to attack here. Get out of the area. And then the people in the Gaza don't get out. And so you have civilians hurt. So I think what we have to realize is it's a war. Israel's going to do its best not to hurt civilians. But what are we talking about here? Because, you can listen to people like Caroline Glick and people that are actually in Israel and understand the people of Gaza has voted in Hamas for the last 16 years. Okay. About a 90% approval. Okay. So we have a problem on the ground with even the civilians. I'm not saying they deserve death, but I'm saying it's the culture that's there that has supported Hamas and Fatah and this death cult to want to kill Jews. This is why Israel cannot do a deal with these people, because they want to. How do you do a deal with people that want to kill you? Okay. That says you don't have a right to exist, don't have a right to be on your land, and so forth. So this is what Israel's facing. Now, here's the thing. The latest is Blinken went in there today or yesterday. I can't remember. I think it was today. And did an 8-hour meeting or 7-hour meeting with Israel. And basically, I was listening to Caroline Glick, and she came out and said, look, here's what the deal was. The United States threatened Israel and said, look, you will continue to do humanitarian aid into the civilians in the Gaza. If not, we will pull your military resources from you if you don't. So they threatened Israel. And of course, the United States gives military weapons, fighter jets, ballistic missiles, all kinds of other things to help protect themselves. So basically, according to Caroline Glick, Israel was threatened by the United States that will pull your resources militarily if you don't allow humanitarian aid to go in there. And again, humanitarian aid, let me put that in air quotes. Okay, we've been giving humanitarian aid to the Gaza for years. We give $235 billion and it never gets on the ground. It gets into the terrorist hands. Anyway, then Biden is deciding to come there on Wednesday. And basically what according to the Israeli sources that I read, it's basically delaying them going in. He's acting basically, as Caroline Glick says, as a human shield, basically, from Israel actually going in there, because they're not going to go in until Biden leaves. And so it's delaying what's going on. So it's messy. Pray for Israel, but they need to go in there and extract Hamas. No doubt about it.
So you touched on a couple things that were actually questions I wanted to address. You talked about the underlying motive of Hamas. This brings up this question, and it's thrown around by the leftist media. It's thrown around by a lot of unthinking Christians. But, what about the two-state solution? Won't we fix the Palestinian problem by giving them a two-state solution?
Right. Yeah, and okay, let's just go back to to 1947, before Israel became a nation. The partition from the United Nations was to give Israel land and, quote unquote, these Arabs, which are nothing more than Jordanians. They're Jordanian Arabs. They're not. The Palestinian term was actually created in 1964 as a victim group that was put on Jordanian refugees, basically. And Jordan doesn't even want them. None of the Arab countries want them. But here's what we have to understand: land was given to them. Land was given to Israel in the partitioning in 1947. And of course, Israel was given a narrow sliver of land. And then obviously the Jordanians were given land as well. And here's the problem. So they didn't like that. They didn't like their land, the land of Israel being partitioned or whatever. And Israel is quite fine with letting Arabs live in their land. Even to this day, Arabs live in Israel. The Arabs are part of the Knesset. They're part of a functioning society in Israel, and they get along. But the people in the what we call the West Bank, which you shouldn't even use that, it's Judea and Samaria, and then in Gaza, these Arabs refuse to get along. They refuse to go even by what the UN partitioned the land out to be. And they just basically want to drive Israel into the sea, destroy them, and then take all the land. So they don't even want to abide by international standards, okay? So that's that. But let's just go to the biblical standards. The land belongs to the Jews. End of story. The Abrahamic covenant gives the land to Abraham's seed, the Jews, and no one else. So from the biblical standpoint, from a biblical Christianity, this is where I can't understand Christians who read the same Bible you and I read, not understand the promises given to the Abrahamic covenant, that the land belongs to them as a perpetual gift, obviously. And, and this is, we're even having this debate with Christians. I get having this debate with secularists. I totally get that, because they don't understand the biblical framework. I just don't get us having to make an argument with another Christian. And therein lies, is this biblical ignorance, or is this a product of replacement theology, Lee? What's going on here? And to that point, I'm very concerned about it, because I'm seeing things on the ground here in America from the churches that I don't like.
Yes, we're definitely seeing the replacement theology come in from different angles. I mean, it's coming in with the revival of Reformed eschatology. It's coming in with certain charismatic groups that have a kingdom dominion mentality, a new apostolic mentality. But it's also coming in with Christians who have been reading the progressive dispensationalism, which waters down the distinction between the church and Israel. Yeah.
And we call that leaky dispensationalism, or whatever they call it, for progressive dispensational. It's like it's the George Ladd already not yet mentality. Yep. And that's unbiblical. You can't say that Jesus is on King David's throne. King David's throne is a political throne in Israel, and he will not sit on that until he comes back at the second coming. And so this already not yet is kind of what I think a hybrid of covenant theology and basically coming out of the Reformed idea, which blurs the line and makes this distinction between Israel and the church very blurry. And that is the key in hermeneutics. You must keep both entities separate and understand, that they have two different roles. Because, man, if you blur that, it gets really messy quick. And then here's what we're starting to see on the internet. Well, the real people of God are these people, the Christians. And wait a second, there's two people of God. There is the Christians, but there is the Jews too. And you must keep those distinct. It's a typology of Jacob having Rachel and Leah. He had two
That's right.
wives. And so the typology with God, he has two vehicles, Israel and the church, and both of them are considered, the bride of Christ and then the wife of Yahweh.
That's right.
And so you have to keep those distinct, and they have both different roles to play. But anyway, what's happening now is you're starting to hear this, and I call it a kind of a veiled sense of anti-Semitism, saying we're the new Jews. Oh no, you don't. Don't go there and say you're the new Jew, you're the new Israel. That is a cloak of anti-Semitism. I mean, that's what you heard in Germany, man. And that, God's done with the Jews, he's done with the Jewish nation. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I know where that leads. You be very, very careful if you go down that line of thinking.
Yeah, you cannot go down that road without ending in anti-Semitism.
And historically, you're right, Lee. Historically, church history verifies that.
Yes.
Totally.
And I think the reason that it does that is that was the founding spirit of all replacement theology. It was founded on a spirit of hatred for the Jews.
Well, I mean, think about this. I mean, people don't have to go too far if you just read any church history about how Calvin and Luther thought about the Jews. And I know the reformers want to make these guys heroes and everything, but my goodness, if you read their words about the Jews, you think you're listening to Hitler. Yeah. I mean, Hitler even used the words of Martin Luther, saying, look, I'm just quoting your guy to the Lutheran church. Yeah. This is your guy saying this. I'm just following what your guy said. Luther got to the point where he even said, we just need to round the Jews up in their synagogues and burn them in their synagogues. Whoa, excuse me. But then this goes back even to Augustine, as you know. And then Augustine, with his, replacement theology, that's really where it all comes from, is Augustinianism. And he was a Manichaean Gnostic, for goodness sakes. And he brought a lot of that paganism, that Greek thought into Christianity. And hence, really, Calvinism is Augustinianism. And Augustine brought his all-millennialism into Reformed theology. That's what we're dealing with today, right?
Yes,
and so here we are with a product of a bad theology that seeped into the church, and then we shouldn't be shocked when people believe bad theology, and then you see it in their behavior. And Absolutely. What we're talking about is anti-Semitism, or what really the new anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism.
That's right. That's what they cloak themselves under.
Yes, anti-Zionism. Well, we're not against the Jewish people, but we're against them having the land. Well, excuse me. Then what are you going to tell God about him telling Abraham, it's your land, it's the Jews' land? What are you going to do about that? How are you going to make the promises made to Israel about the land and try to fit that? Well, that means the church has now assumed those promises in replacement theology. What are you talking about? How does the church get land? What are you talking about? The church is not a nation.
Yeah, we have a heavenly call.
That's right. A heavenly city, that's ours, the New Jerusalem, not an earthly Jerusalem. So, and Lee, I mean, it gets very muddy quick, but then we shouldn't be shocked if someone goes to a church that's teaching replacement theology or preterism or something like that, why they would come out in favor of Hamas, saying that Israel's occupying the land and Israel's treating them bad. I shouldn't be shocked by that kind of rhetoric.
That's right.
But yet we're hearing it, right?
We sure are. I've discovered long ago that bad doctrine always has results in how you live, how you think, how you process information, how you respond to the world around. There's no such thing as doctrine that doesn't have bad effects. Every truth that God's revealed in the scriptures is intended to give man a divinely bestowed blessing. So every time that we let go of truth and replace it with darkness, we are creating problems in our own psychology, in our own thinking, in our own heart, and in our relationships with everybody around us.
Yeah, and the funny thing that about that, it puts the person out of reality.
It does.
Because you're totally right. What I've noticed that when someone goes into this behavior thought process from false theology, it doesn't matter what facts or evidence I actually present to the individual. They just reject it wholeheartedly without, it's like they don't care about the facts and evidence, about what's going on the ground. When I go and tell them, hey, look, man, they're beheading babies. Well, how many babies? Oh, that's all propaganda. Like, so what? What if it's one baby? Is that enough for you, or 40? How many babies do they need to behead before you will make a moral judgment on Hamas? And it irritates me, but it's like, here's the facts that well, we don't know if they burned bodies. What are you talking about? They don't. I saw the evidence. I saw Hamas posted the bodies on their own Twitter feed. I watched it. I saw it, and so did Israel. We don't know about that. What? And you start realizing, oh my goodness, their bad theology has put them out of reality, out of touch with facts and evidence, to where facts and evidence don't work anymore for them anymore, because they have a narrative in their head. The Jews are bad. The Jews are bad. It's really scary, Lee. It's really scary what I'm seeing.
Yep, we need to get anchored in our mind that that the truth is such a glorious position in light that it's not afraid of any set of facts, of any set of evidence. It's not afraid of it. It doesn't have to run from it. It doesn't have to hide from it. If you're going to run and hide from facts and evidence, you're living in the darkness, not in the light. The truth will embrace it and say, wow, now I got even more light. Wow, thank you for balancing me. Thank you for correcting me. But if you're running after darkness, you're just like a cockroach trying to squeeze under the stove.
That's right. That's a good analogy, my friend. You're absolutely right. And that's go ahead.
I was going to say, let's go back to the Gaza invasion. Yeah. For days, we've been hearing Israel's ready to invade Gaza. What's holding up the show, bro?
Well, pray for Benjamin Netanyahu, because he is being pressured like there's no tomorrow from not only the Biden administration, and like I just said, that they're threatening him. We'll take away material weapons and stuff from you, which they need. But the international community is putting pressure on him too, because they're not going to win the propaganda war. They're just going to be lied about. And so right. Netanyahu's trying to play this as safe as he possibly can. Honestly, they need to just go in there and just go in there and attack. But the international community will come so hard on them, and the propaganda will lie so bad about them. It puts Israel in the middle of a crosshairs of a propaganda war. And that's really what's happening. So Israel was going to go in, and they backed off, and they were just going to just rip everyone to shreds, basically. And the pressure got so bad that they're doing more of this extraction thing, and even letting the civilians out. But here's the funny thing: is Hamas is not even letting its own civilians out. They've blockaded the civilians from even getting out and getting the help. Egypt, how come Egypt won't let them in? Egypt has blocked them as well. And so I think it's sad. It's very frustrating, because Israel always has to fight with one hand behind its back, and under the watchful eye of, the UN or whoever. But regardless, no matter what happens, they're just going to be the bad guys all the time with the international community. And like I've said, I've preached a couple times now, this whole thing is set a stage setting for future events for Israel, obviously, of other invasions. We have a Psalm 83 invasion, possibly. We have a Gog, a Magog invasion. And where does that put them? It puts them in a situation to where they will eventually fall into the hands of the Antichrist and look to him for help. And therein lies the covenant in the future. So a lot of what we're seeing here, yes, Israel needs to go and wipe out Hamas, but then when that Iran's behind it, so now Israel knows they have to deal with Iran, and Iran's already warned them, saying, look, if you mess with Hamas, we're going to mess with you. And so it sets off a lot of things in motion. And then when you deal with Iran, then you've got to deal with Russia and Turkey at the same time, who are in alliance. And this is according to Ezekiel, right? Well, Ezekiel predicted the alliance, and here we are seeing the alliance. And we just know that no matter what happens, it's just a powder keg. And the big overarching issue is Israel will finally be isolated by itself. It says in Zechariah 12, all nations will come against her. Not even the United States will be there. And why? Well, it comes down to, Daniel chapter 12. It's to break the power of the holy people, to break their self-reliance, to break their reliance on their military, and for them to call out to Jesus to save them. And obviously we know the end story of that, but this is what's setting everything up. So long story short, that's what's happening, I guess.
It really is a tragedy in my mind that Israel is caught between a rock and a hard place. If she goes in and does what she ought to do to Hamas, completely destroy every tunnel in the north and completely remove every Hezbollah, not the Hezbollah's up north, but every Hamas terrorist and every Islamic Jihad terrorist in that the Gaza Strip, and then move everybody to the north half and go through the south half and remove all the tunnels there and destroy everything and do the job right. If she does that, she's going to have the entire Muslim community against her. She won't have an ally in the Islamic world at all. And her closest allies like the UK and America are also going to be extremely angry with her. So she can't win if she goes that way. But if she does a quarter of the way job, like she's about not even a quarter of the way now, and if she stops short a quarter of the way, a fifth of the way, and throws a few rockets up north at a few Hezbollah locations, and then we put a bandage on everything and we go back to an uneasy status quo where we've been for the last 20 years, she hasn't resolved the problem, and it's going to be worse in the future. So she cannot win. She's in a no-win situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's darned if you do and darned if you don't. And honestly, that's what puts her between the crosshairs with all of this. And for some reason, too, Lee, through all of this, they somehow have to rely on the Antichrist for help in all of this. Somehow it sets them up to get into a situation to where, hey, we need your help, and he's willing to help them. And the ironic thing is, I've said this before, the friend that will arise is the Antichrist to Israel. He will say, I'll help you. I'll be the one that protects you, because the whole international community is going to go against her. And it is now, right? And the more they take out Hamas and Fatah and more Arab states and whatnot, the more she gets this status as she's a bully, she's an apartheid state, she's the aggressor, and something must be done about Israel, obviously satanic. But it throws her right into the hands of the Antichrist, who will be her best friend. And it's sad to watch this happen. And we know what the whole reason and purposes of God are. That's why, like when I was listening to Olivier Melnick about this, he mentioned that's why we want to pray that many Jews get saved now before the rapture, so they don't have to go through that awful time of the tribulation where 2/3 of them get wiped out by the Antichrist.
Wow.
And all of this. So yeah, it's setting up the whole scenario, man.
Well, here's one more question related to the one we just did.
Mm-hmm.
Israel is being restrained from dealing with the Hezbollah problem on the north. What's the restraint here?
Well, it's a lot of the restraint has to do with Syria and Iran, from what I can understand. You might have some other insight that I don't have, but the United States, here's what you have to understand. The United States has been doing deals with Iran behind the scenes for a long time, all the way back to the Obama administration, okay? And what it got revealed just recently is there's been millions and millions of dollars being funneled to Iran. And this came out of one of Trump's ex-envoys to Iran. Well, anyway, there's been money, obviously. $6 billion was, they say, well, we froze that. We're not giving that to them, but they're going to give it to them. And even the Arab news say it's a joke. They're still going to get the money. So one of the things about Hezbollah is actually a front group for Iran. And so a lot of what Israel's doing is understanding that if we attack this area, then we bring in Syria and we bring in Iran, and that causes a bigger problem. And I guarantee you, with Blinken going in there with an 8-hour meeting, that Blinken made them fully aware of them not wanting to do anything with Iran or whatnot, and backing them off of that. Because look, Iran said they want to wipe out Israel, but yet we're doing deals with them. And here's the sad part. The money we're giving to Iran is going to Iran to fund Hamas, to fund Hezbollah, to kill Jews and attack Jews. So there's a whole thing there where Israel has to play it very safe. Otherwise, they tick the United States off, and they'll lose support from them. And the whole Gog and Magog invasion type of thing. And not that they're aware of that, but they're aware of the alliances that are there. And they're aware that America's been doing deals with Iran and stuff like that. So there's a restraint basically on Israel, knowing that their greatest ally, America, is telling them to back down.
Reminds me of the Mafia. You get 3 or 4 big Mafia families. They kind of divide a big city up. They have their territory. They cooperate occasionally, but they try and stay out of each other's hair. And so one of the Mafia families comes to Israel and says, we'll protect you. But that same Mafia family is also working with the other Mafia families that are opposed to Israel. And so to me, when your best friend is really only half a friend, this is not a good situation.
No, it shows you how wicked the world has become, and realize, oh my goodness, this thing is such a mess. This is why it takes Jesus coming back and establishing his government, because there's no unraveling this, Lee.
That's
and
right.
People say, well, we do a restart. No, you can't. This is so bad. And people say, well, you think it's ever coming back? No, I don't. I'm sorry. I hate to be pessimistic, but I'm a realist. And when you see this level of corruption, I mean, just take, for example, Ukraine. And why are we giving billions of dollars into the Ukraine? And that mess that's going on there to fight a proxy war with Russia? What's happening here? To unravel all this, it would take the Messiah. It takes a God act to do that. That's why I realize I've come to the realization we're not coming back, Lee. And you can't, and Israel's not going to be able to trust anybody. And I get it now. I totally get it. Why? Israel will have to be reduced to where they are calling on the name of Jesus to save them.
Amen.
That's where I start realizing America won't be there. Of course, we're going to be raptured. I think what would the world look like when every Bible believing Christian is gone? The salt and light of the earth. We know the 144,000 come into play. We know the 2 witnesses come into play. I get that. But there for a while, for however long it lasts, there are no believers on earth.
That's right.
They've all been taken. And when you realize that, I think that's when the clutch is popped in the world stage of just zeroing in on Israel, because, there's no evangelical support. It's gone. We're raptured, and what's left is the false church. Obviously, it's going to be in line with the whore of Babylon, and Israel will not have a prayer, so to speak, with support. So very, very trying times, no doubt about that.
Yes, it is. What's really interesting, you talked about this a little earlier, about Blinken and his demands on how Israel operate in the Gaza Strip. It's really a shocker to me that he'd say, okay, if you want bunker busters, which Israel needs to take out the tunnels. Most of those tunnels are deep enough you can't get them without bunker busters. Bunker busters come from America. Israel doesn't manufacture her own. She has to buy them from America.
Yep.
And Blinken has told Israel, okay, we're willing to give you the bunker busters that you need under two conditions. One, you have to open up the humanitarian resupply line, the humanitarian corridor, which that's just a euphemism for we want you to resupply Hamas. And
basically.
And then the second condition is you can't use the bunker busters against targets that are, well, they didn't say it that way. They said you can't use those bunker busters against the UN hospitals and the UN schools. Well, Hamas puts their headquarters and their munition depots underneath the schools and the hospitals. And she uses schoolyards and hospital courtyards for missile launching sites. So you're basically saying to Israel, okay, if you tie what, like you'd said earlier, tie one of your hands behind your back, we will give you the weapons you need, but you have to promise not to use them against most of the targets.
So therein lies the problem. And that's why this will continue, because they will not fully extract everything of Hamas and Hezbollah like they need to. I mean, it needs to be done once and for all, but it's not. So therefore, this is what sets up Bible prophecy, where you start having a Psalm 83, an Arab invasion, or you have a Gog of Magog invasion, because Israel is not allowed to finish the deal. And I think when we look at that, it's frustrating to me, it's frustrating to you or anyone else that hears this. Like, yeah, man, Israel should be able to go in there and just wipe these terroristic groups out. But no, they will not be allowed for obviously other reasons. We know political reasons, all right? But then it plays into providence of God. And it's amazing to watch this because, it's predicted. And we see it, and we wish it could stop. But this thing is like watching a slow motion car wreck. We know where it ends, and it doesn't end well. So Israel's not going to be able to totally root out Hamas or Hezbollah. This is going to continue, and unfortunately, that means everything's going to be dragged out, and there's going to be more Jewish casualties. Israel will just continue this perpetual war. And, people talk about Israel having the Samson option. And I get that. I don't know if they'll ever get to that point. Where the Samson option is, well, we'll take ourselves out while we'll take out our own enemies. They always say they have that option, but I just don't know if that will happen, because why would they need to do a deal with the Antichrist? I mean, Isaiah 28 talks about the content of that covenant, and it's saying that it's to protect them from the overflowing scourge that will pass through the land. So they do it to protect themselves from a military invasion, and so there's the reasoning for it. And so Israel is either in a weakened state militarily, or I don't know, or they just have so much animosity from the international community that Antichrist becomes their friend. I don't know, but certainly what's happening on the ground right now plays into that scenario. And that's why I think everyone should be watching how this thing goes down, because it gives us the closer we get, like John Walvoord said, the more you will understand the prophetic scenario better. He said, and he said it, the generation that lives closest to the last days will understand it the best. And I think that's what's happening. And we're starting to understand this really good now.
Yes. And here's another thing I've been thinking about, bro. We have a tremendous case of hypocrisy here. When America had a death toll in a similar range due to the 9/11 situation, we went to a massive war.
Yeah.
And nobody's opinion was going to shake us from doing what we figured had to be done. And that war went on for years. Fast forward to today, we have a death toll in Israel that if you made it a proportion to the population, the death toll that Israel suffered on Saturday would be like if we had insurrection with fundamentalists in New York and Washington, D.C. and LA and a few places like that, and they wiped out 50,000 Americans.
Yes.
This is a tremendous amount of hypocrisy here to say, okay, we're the big daddy here. We're here to help. And I know that we went out of our way to crush our enemies when we suffered casualties similar to yours, but we're not going to let you have that kind of response. We think that that's going to be overkill on your part.
Yeah. And it's amazing too, that because you're right, we go to war over Saudi Arabia as terrorists, the Osama bin Laden, and we go to a war with Iraq. Go figure on that one. But you're right. There's a double standard when it deals with Israel. We have to understand too that there's with the international community, including the United States, there's a military industrial complex. That's what you're seeing happen with Russia and the Ukraine and all that proxy war that we see here. But for some reason, the military industrial complex doesn't work for Israel. And in fact, they're the ones scrutinized. They're the ones that can't be allowed to fight with both fists, so to speak. So at the end of the day, I think what really is behind a lot of that, it's satanic. When someone doesn't have a right to defend themselves, I mean, picture that on a human level of someone breaking into your house and saying, or slitting the throat of your family, and you can't fight back. Oh, we're going to scrutinize how you fight back. That's insane. You would think someone would have a definite right to protect their family and go after those who killed their family and for justice. But justice doesn't work for Israel for some reason. And I think it's because of the satanic world system. And I always have to fall back on this, because when things don't make sense, there's always a spiritual answer to it. Well, the God of this world controls this world system, and he rewards its own. And Israel is in the crosshairs of the God of this world, Satan.
That's right.
And so Israel's never going to get a pass. Israel's never going to get a workaround of a situation. They're always going to be hammered for their position. And this is what I finally started realizing, Lee. I think I've always known it theoretically, but when you see it on the ground, you really start realizing, oh my goodness, dealing with Israel theologically and supporting Israel like you and I do, and the people listening to your podcast, it's touching the third rail for Satan. You really upset Satan and the demonic forces when you deal with Israel. I have never seen so much pushback in supporting of Israel versus most of the other theologies that we hold to. And I couldn't figure out for the longest reasons, what's the problem here? And now I realize it. I mean, there's so much riding on the nation of Israel, the Abrahamic promises, and obviously the land, the Davidic, the seed promises, and all, and the second coming's predicated on Israel's acceptance of the Messiah. And so you start realizing theologically, oh, okay, that's why Satan hammers Israel and hammers anyone that would try to support her, to realize if you do that, the whole world system actually goes against you.
That's right.
People ask me, Olivier Melnick is real good on this, and you can talk to him about it. But what's the root cause of anti-Semitism? Because it doesn't make any sense. Well, why would you be against a people group that produces the most Nobel Prizes? They're not terrorists. They're blessing the nations, even in unbelief. And why would you get against it? The only thing you can explain it is satanic.
That's right.
It's a satanic issue. And so therein lies why they can't fight militarily, and why the United States can go after Osama bin Laden and go to war with Iraq, of all places.
Yep. If we boiled the whole situation in the Middle East down to a cage fight, it would be one Israeli against 5 bad guys, and the Israeli would be given rules of fighting that don't apply to the other ones, that they would give them great restrictions. Now, in the fighting world, people would boo that, and they think it would be ridiculous. 5 against 1, and the guy that's all by himself is got fighting restrictions the other guys don't have. But that's exactly what's going on in the Middle East.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's not going to change until Messiah comes back. And that's, again, plays into the plays into the fact that Israel falls into the arms of the Antichrist for help.
Amen. Sure does.
And man, I can totally see that developing right in front of my very eyes. He will be their only friend, Lee. And you're like, oh my goodness, how satanic is that? Wow.
Yeah, it's like the same kind of friend she's had for the last 5 decades, except worse.
Right. Yeah. And then we know, what's behind this. And of course, that friendship gets burned, obviously, to their detriment.
Yeah.
Because, and God continues to warn them. And he tells them, your covenant with death will be annulled.
That's right.
Because what does Antichrist do? You think he's your friend, and you should have looked to me, Yahweh is saying. You should look to Jesus, but you said you looked to him instead, and he's going to burn you. And part of that burning is to teach Israel a lesson. Quit looking to anyone other than the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the Messiah, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And they will learn that lesson, but unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of breaking, according to Daniel, to get to that point.
Here's another thing I find very confusing about the whole situation. In theory, we're Israel's friend. In theory, we say we're against Islamic fundamentalism and terrorism. But yet we send money and arms and training to Palestinian law enforcement. And even at times we've done a little bit with some of their supposed good military outfits.
Yeah, we wouldn't train them.
Yeah, they get equipment and money and training. And yet you'd have to be blind to miss that a lot of that money and funding and training ends up back into the hands of Hamas and other terrorist organizations. Same thing for Lebanon. We train the Lebanon military and we train Lebanon law enforcement. We provide them with military munitions and arms. And yet you'd have to be blind to not see that a lot of that material and training ends up in terrorist organizations like Hezbollah that are anti-Israel and anti-American. This is bizarre to me.
It is bizarre. So here's maybe the audience can think about this. Are these people stupid, or is this intentional? I think there's maybe a combination of both. I mean, you trained Hamas policemen or whatever, Palestinian policemen or whatever. We go over there and train them. And yet this summer, they send their kids to their summer camp, and their summer camp includes training militarily how to kill Jews. Okay, that's their summer camp. And yet we're giving them the training. And it's obvious, too, that this is interesting, that when you look at some of these Hamas guys carrying rifles and what they're doing, that they have no training whatsoever, which is a good thing for Israel, right? They're just totally clueless about how to carry a weapon, how to, do anything militarily, which is good. But nonetheless, what are we, stupid? And either we're the dumbest people on the planet to do this with them, or we have an agenda. And I don't want to be, a conspiracy theorist, but I'm left with, there's a gap here. What are you thinking? You're going to go train Hamas and Fatah and Hezbollah? What are you, crazy? Yeah. And I think some of these people are. I think it's partly they don't have any moral anchor in their soul. I mean, you look at a guy like Joe Biden, he has no moral anchor in his soul. These people are soulless. They're just so far away from God that you lose all morality. You don't even know what morality is. And when you do that, you lose the ability to discern good and evil. You just don't know what even good and evil is anymore. And I think a lot of people are like that. That's why you see these college campuses with the ignorance of these college students supporting Hamas. And it's just out of pure ignorance, man. They just have no clue what's happening on the ground. But then when you look at people like, people that work for the FBI, CIA, and people in high military positions that are doing this, you're going to say, hey, man, I don't know if I can give you a pass on you being ignorant of this.
Yeah, that's right.
I think you're up to something. And I don't know if it's just from your anti-Semitism or your Zions of protocol that you read, or whatever you're thinking, that there's this Jewish cabal that's trying to rule the world, whatever. I think it's nefarious to some degree. I think it's intentional.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. The whole anti-Israel, anti-Bible mentality is being spread through the entire world, through education, through media, through entertainment, through recreation. It's in the highest levels of the American government. It's in the highest levels of the European, Canadian, Australian government. And once in a while, something will happen like this where the pendulum will swing a little bit in Israel's favor for a few days or a week or two, and then it'll swing back and go right back to the status quo. And what we're facing right now is that this anti-Israel mentality, this anti-Israel hatred is actually strengthening around the world. The kind of hatred that was felt 30, 40 years ago, primarily by the Muslims, is now being spread by college students in America and Europe and Canada, and by adults that have been educated in the last 10, 20 years. This hatred is venomous. It's taken over the world.
And where does that go? Because when you have that kind of irrational hatred, like Islam does, and now you see it in college students, that basically you see it from the left, right?
Yep.
Where does it go? Because everything you believe, like we talked about earlier, everything you believe is correlated to how you behave. And you're seeing, things come out like, well, they say even any civilian Jew is fair game. Whoa, excuse me, what are you talking about? Any civilian Jew is fair game. What are we, in Nazi Germany? Where are you getting this mentality? And that's what I'm starting to see erupt from this Jew hatred. And so, we've talked about, our public schools and our colleges and universities. They've turned basically into indoctrination centers. And I can tell you pretty much where they are on every issue, because they're the opposite of us, Lee. And so if we're pro-Israel, they're anti-Israel. They're pro-Palestinian. And it's like, okay, man, we have set up this next generation to hate Israel, and basically to hate all God, and to hate the Bible, and to hate all of theology, whether it's LGBT, whether it's transgender, whether it's grooming children, whatever, pick the topic. And we have a society that's anti-Bible. Well, of course they're going to be anti-Israel. Of course, this totally makes sense. And then again, if you allow people to think like this towards the Jews, then I know exactly the next stage is to make them subhuman, which happened in Germany. You make them subhuman, and then that gives you the right or whatever to do whatever you feel is necessary to do it. And here's the concern of mine. We're getting like that. And I'm watching even the churches who are remaining silent on this issue. I was talking to Olivier Melnick. I was talking to Tom Hughes about this. And we all agree on this. What you're going to see is a repeat of that Lutheran church. Remember the story about it, that the cart of the Jews, the railway was going behind the church or whatever, and it stopped behind the church. And you could hear the screams of the Jews, being taken to, the gas chambers. And the Lutheran pastor told his congregation just to sing louder, so it would drown out the sounds of the Jews in the boxcars. And you're thinking, well, that could never happen. Oh, no, it can. Because I'm seeing that level of hatred towards Jews now. I mean, New York and LA are seeing high levels of anti-Semitism like there's never been before.
That's right.
And if you don't think that can happen here, you're crazy. It will happen if it's not stopped. And that's where, you and I and the people listening, we got to be on the forefront of this. We've got to be able to speak the truth, especially to the people who are caught in this propaganda war, because that's what really it is. It's a propaganda war.
Absolutely. Now, here's a question that a lot of people have been raising, and I'd like to hear your take on it.
Okay.
There was obviously a delay Saturday morning, 5 to 7 hours delay from the time the first reports went out that they needed help in the kibbutzes off of the Gaza Strip there, until there was actually armed convoys of soldiers from the IDF showing up. Now, some people have postulated, oh, there's no way that there would have been a delay unless the top brass and the government elite intentionally told everybody to stand aside and let this attack happen because they wanted to justify a war on Hamas. Now, when I hear this, it makes my ears ring, brother.
Right.
In my mind, I feel like I should never go down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole unless it's the only explanation for this situation.
Yeah, no, you're totally right, and that therein lies the problem, and that it's the problem on the opposite end, and it's reading into a situation where you don't have any facts and evidence, and reading conspiracy theories into it, and then the problem is, wait a second, we haven't given enough time to let the facts come out, and let the dust settle, and then you can make evaluations. But right now, you're making evaluations based on a lack of information, and the problem is, Lee, the information is changing day to day. We're finding out new things and this and that. And the latest, from what I understand about this delay, had nothing to do with, Israel wants a war with Hamas, and they set the whole thing up and they let their people get killed. And that's crazy thinking like that. Oh my goodness. That like Olivier Melnick, he goes, you know what that is, Brandon? He said it's it's anti-Semitism wrapped in the veil of conspiracy, basically, because you're implying that the Jews would allow other thousands of Jews, innocent Holocaust survivors, babies, to be killed. I mean, that's insane. What I understand, at the best of my knowledge, and David Towle has talked to Tom about this, and people can listen to David Towle from Israel, and he's a born again Jewish believer that's an officer in the IDF, says, hey, look, you're going to have to give the devil its due. This was coordinated. This was not just some guy, who just decided to do something. This was very well thought of. In fact, according to reports, they had been planning this for nearly 2 years to communication. And it was very well coordinated. It was very well planned. They did it on a holiday, just like Yom Kippur. When that happened, they did it on a holiday. And quite frankly, a lot of what David Towle was saying is that there was a breakdown in Israel's intelligence, not because they were letting this happen, but there was just simply a breakdown, and so that is as much as we know so far, and that's as far as we need to go, because we don't have all the details yet. And so we're going to take that on face value, but to go into the idea that Israel did this on purpose, wow, you're willing to say that Netanyahu or the Israeli government is murdering its own people, and you're like, wow, okay, man, I can't support you down that rabbit hole. That's ridiculous. And if you think Israel's that nefarious, no, I'm sorry, I can't follow you on that.
Yeah, and to me too, that like within 48 hours, we had some information come out that informed us that they had used drones to take out communication dishes, to take out. They took out communication towers. They took out guard stations. They took out the local police stations. They disrupted the communications. They immediately took out cameras and all kinds of information. So there was a great disruption there. And the people that were in the immediate area that would have normally responded to a small incursion, they were overwhelmed. They couldn't respond to all those incursions at one time.
That's right.
And they were quickly taken out of the picture to by and large. And with my own experience in the military, which isn't extensive, but it was enough in the special operations in America here for my short time that I was with them, you come to realize that even in times of peace, in your training, there can be breakdowns in your logistics. And when you're planning for something 2 weeks to 2 months ahead of time, and you can have breakdown in logistics and breakdown in your supply, breakdown in your operations planning, then when you now switch that from 2 weeks to 2 months to plan for something, and this comes out of the blue, you're not prepared for it, and you've got to come together in a few hours and get your logistics together, get your troops assembled at staging areas, get them assembled at mobilization areas, get them equipped and outfitted for the mission, get the logistics in place to give them food and water and communication and transportation, and then come up with an operations order that's going to coordinate the different units, because this isn't like one company going to one kibbutz to take out one small problem. This is a bunch of companies and battalions and brigades going to take care of a situation in a vast, extensive piece of territory, and they've got no idea really how many that they're dealing with. And so the fact that they put this together in 7 hours, folks, that's actually pretty impressive, if you ask me.
Yeah, you're making a good point. Absolutely, and that's kind of what David said. They were overwhelmed and they had a breakdown.
Yep.
And they weren't expecting this. And again, man, if these people have been masterminding this for 2 years, that some estimates, hey man, like David Tao said, give the devil his due. They worked. They worked the system, and they got this to happen. The thing about it is, you're right. Just because there was a 7-hour delay or whatever you want to call that, of them scurrying to find out what in the world's really happening here, that should just quell any conspiracy theory at that point. I would imagine. It's just, hey man, come on, with all those factors, how else do you expect Israel to respond to this? So but again, you and I can't stop the conspiracy theories. And here's at the basis of this. Why go there? Is it because you get more likes? Is it because it's clickbait? Is it because it gives you more notoriety? The weirder things that you say and the wilder the things, the funny thing is I've noticed about being in the prophecy world for all these years is that there's an element in the prophecy world that's Gnostic. And what I mean by that is secret knowledge. We have secret knowledge that no one has. And Lee, I'm sure you're bombarded with it. I get bombarded with Tom, Billy, all of us, John Howler, all of them get bombarded with people saying, hey, I know this. And it's like, well, where did you get that information? Well, I got it off a YouTube video, or I got it off a Twitter thing, or I got it off this. And it's like, well, can you verify that? Well, no, but this is what they're saying. And what I start realizing is that's almost Gnostic. That I have secret information that no one has, and you're all wrong. I have the information, and yet I can't verify it, but this is what people are telling me. And it's a form of Gnosticism, really, Lee, is what I'm seeing. I don't come out and make statements unless I can back up what I'm saying. At least, with 3 or 4 articles or whatever saying, hey, this is what they're saying on the ground here. And for people to do that, I think it's like, what are you trying to one up everyone? You have secret intel. Is that what you're telling me, that no one else watches? Because Lee, you watch the news. I watch the news. Tom watches the news. Billy watches it. We're all watching. And yet those things apparently slip by the whole group of prophecy leaders. And Joe Blow has secret intel that no one else has. And it's all past all of us. Even the people in Israel, it's past all of them. And now they have that information. Quite frankly, that's Gnosticism. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to explain it as.
Yeah. Well, you have to go down the rabbit hole, and then you have to drink the Kool-Aid. That's just how it works. And if you're not willing to go down the rabbit hole and drink the Kool-Aid, then you're forced to just fall back on a big pile of facts, a big pile of data, and your God-given reason. And that's too much work. People want to have a dream. They want to have a vision. They want to have some really cool sounding theory that makes loose connections and regards them as tight connections, that makes gigantic jumps and gigantic extrapolations where they're not really a logical connection. And they take things that are related, but they're not identical, and they regard them as identical, and they just start making all kinds of chaotic mistakes like that, and it leads to the rabbit hole.
Yeah. And so what does it do with the overall effect of Bible prophecy? It discredits everybody in our camp, because we get a black eye from the secularists or whatever, or even other Christians who watch this, and they're like, okay, that guy's part of your community. And we're like, no, he has nothing to do with us. That guy is unrelated. But it doesn't matter to them. They throw us all in the same camp, right? And then so here, and so you can see the devil's tactic in all of this. Let's discredit the conservative prophecy teachers that are teaching correctly with the Looney Tune conspiracy theorists. And then basically then they won't listen to Lee, they won't listen to Brandon, they won't listen to Tom, they won't listen to Billy or whoever, in the prophecy world, Jan Markell or whoever, they're not going to listen to, because they're all crazy. They're all tinfoil hat brigades. And that's, you can see it's satanic. And these people, what I call are useful idiots. And I don't mean to be derogatory, but that's a communist term for people that don't know they're being used.
Yep, that's right.
And what happens is they become useful idiots for Satan, to discredit all of us in the prophecy world. So it's very nefarious, very evil. So we're being hit by two camps. So you have the replacement theology, the all millennial preterist, post millennial type of eschatology, that's saying, well, you guys are all wrong, you futurists are all wrong, yada yada yada. And then at the same time, then you have the conspiracy theories on the other side of us that are discrediting. So you're having both ends come and attack us on both sides to discredit Bible prophecy. So I hope people can see that, because that's really the drama that we're in right now.
What's frustrating to me is on a daily basis, I'll have sometimes a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen people shoot me social media communications or emails, or they'll put a comment on a YouTube video, and they'll say, oh, you don't believe in conspiracies? Oh, well, okay, so now I guess the vax is okay. Well, wait a minute. There's a difference between a cover-up or a conspiracy in that sense, which anyone with their eyes wide open, there's a ton of scientific evidence. There's scientific data that proves that there's harmful consequences from that. And the evidence has been here for 2 decades from the earliest mRNA published papers.
Yes.
This isn't something that just came out of someone's magic hat. Now, but when you go over to some of these conspiracy theories, which are different than a real conspiracy, now you're talking about, you don't have a massive pile of facts and data that you sift through. You have just some observations. You have a little bit of information. You're making loose connections. You're making assumptions. You're stringing some ideas together like you're stringing hippie beads while you're smoking pot, and it just it's chaotic, the results that you get. And I'm not. There's obviously some real conspiracies out there. That's not something that we deny. But what we're denying is, if you have to go down a rabbit hole and don't have good information, don't have good intel, don't have good logic and reason, and you have to make big extrapolations and big jumps and big assumptions, well, then just don't go down that rabbit hole. Wait until you've got clear information.
Right. What does James say? Be slow to speak, man.
Yeah.
And you're making a good distinction, and that's what I think people need to keep in mind: is the distinction between a conspiracy versus a conspiracy theory. Because we would all agree there's a conspiracy to bring a world government.
Absolutely.
And you know what I mean? That's a conspiracy against humanity. And we all know the facts and evidence about that. They say it. That's what they want to do, right? So everyone would agree that's a conspiracy that's legitimate, right? The vaccines was a conspiracy. You know, the COVID-19 and all that other stuff was a conspiracy. It's legit. We have the facts and evidence behind us. And that's where we need to stay with. But if you go past that, you know, and you start like, okay, why is there an 8-hour delay or 7-hour delay? Well, Netanyahu did it. What? Whoa. You have no facts and evidence, man. And I don't know if they think personally they're going to lose credibility. I don't know if they're even concerned about that, Lee, because when you go there, I would imagine if you and I went there, I'm like, man, if I really say that, I'm going to lose credibility, because if it turns out to be false, I'm really going to look bad. Do they even have that conversation with themselves?
I don't think so.
Is there any introspection?
I don't think so, because to me, when I watch how the date setting camp works, how the conspiracy theory groups work, they remind me of prophets in the charismatic movements like the New Apostolic Reformation. You give a prophecy, it doesn't come true, you tweak your prophecy, and that doesn't work, you tweak it again, and then you sweep it under the rug. Oh yeah, you missed them once in a while, no big deal, let's give another prophecy. Well, that's exactly what they do with their date setting. It's what they do with their conspiracy theories. There's no compunction, there's no repentance, there's no standard. There's no objective standard to compare anything against. So you can't really have a test of right or wrong. It's your opinion's okay, my opinion's okay. That makes me so uncomfortable. That this should be a first principle for anyone that wants to be a disciple of Jesus and a lover of Bible prophecy. Walk away from everything that isn't objective in their handlings of scripture and data. Just walk away.
Yeah.
So what if you miss one or two conspiracies that really are true? I'd rather miss one or two that are really true than start diving down a bunch of rabbit holes and go down 18 or 20 rabbit holes and find that 3 or 4 of them are a half-truth and the rest of them are bankrupt.
Yeah. Well, and you think of the ramifications spiritually of doing something like that. You're in the realm of deception. Maybe you don't intend to deceive, but you're confusing your audience. And if it's a wild goose chase, you're leading people astray. That's the problem.
That's right.
And it's a form of deception. Maybe you don't intend to do that. Well, you know, you're not setting out to deceive, but following a conspiracy theory does lead to deception, and it leads to confusion of people. And so God's not a God of chaos, but of order. And if you're doing that, you're going to have to answer for that at some point in time, either in this life at the Bema seat, for doing something like that. Because, hey, man, you're supposed to be watching over the flock and feeding the flock. And conspiracy theories are not feeding. You and I want to help prepare the flock for whatever's coming. And if we see something, we're saying, hey, this is coming. Digital currency, like we said, that's a conspiracy too. That's coming. I don't know when, but they're trying to implement that. And I think everyone needs to be aware of that. Okay, so in doing that, I'm trying to warn people, this is what's going down. Or we were talking about Israel. This is what's going to go down about her. We need to be aware of this. But when I go conspiracy, it's not preparing anybody. It's deception.
That's right.
Maybe not intentional, but it is deception, and it gets people off. And so here's what's going to happen. You'll put people in a situation to where they will not know what to believe and who to trust anymore. And when you do that to somebody, they're in a confused state at this point in time. And if they're going to say, well, all you guys I'm not going to listen to any more of you guys anymore because of being led astray down a false road or whatever, a rabbit hole. And so I'm just going to stay in a state of not, I don't know anything now. Now that person is in a very vulnerable state because they can be easily deceived by anything. So it sets the person up. So here's what Messiah warned about in Matthew 24. he talked about him being gone, and he was using a parable, but it was legitimate about treating other servants. He says the master left, and while the master left, the other servants saw that he was gone for a long time, and so they started to beat the other servants. And because my master's a long time in coming, so they started beating the other servants, and then he calls them to account. And he basically says, I will cut you in two, and I will assign you a place with the hypocrites. And what is that? What's that passage about? It's about the spiritual abuse of other believers. That if you lead people into rabbit holes and the conspiracy theories, that is spiritual abuse. And you're going to answer for that. That's now, right. What does it mean that Messiah says, I'm going to cut you in two? Well, it's language that means that with his word, he's going to slice and dice you. He's basically going to cut you up at the bema seat by his word about what you did. You're basically like Dr. Fruchtenbaum said, you're going to get the biggest tongue lashing you have ever encountered in your whole life from the Messiah himself. And then your penalty is in the kingdom is to be assigned a place with the hypocrites. Now, wow. Okay. So conspiracy theories lead to spiritual abuse. And that's why I think it's so dangerous, and why Messiah considers it, a spiritual abuse situation, because you're leading people down deception and to get into more deception later on, because they don't know who to believe at that point. So it's a very dangerous territory.
One thing I think about too is you're teaching people how to be sloppy in their reasoning, how to be sloppy in your handling of data, how to be sloppy in your handling of facts, how to make transitions from your information to conclusions, and there's no real connection between the information and the conclusion. Very sloppy. And when you teach habits of sloppy interpretation of data, you're doing the believers a great disservice. And James says, be not many teachers, because we shall be judged more strictly or more harshly.
Yeah.
I would not want to stand before the Lord to give account at the bema seat if I've been teaching these conspiracy theories. And I mean, we could list dozens of them. But it's worse than that, because now these people that learn, it's not just the teachers, but the people that imbibe this stuff, they're usually worse than their teachers in the application of it. So the teacher holds 5 or 6 conspiracy theories. You get all souped up on conspiracy theory juice, and you're all excited, and you find 4 that he didn't see, and your spiritual children find 4 or 5 that you didn't see. This stuff just grows like weeds in the garden.
Man, you're hitting the nail on the head, because you'll always see this, that the students of the guy, whoever it might be, or gal, whoever it might be, always go farther than the teacher. They always do that. I've seen that so many times. And then you think about this, you bring it into the unbelieving realm. Okay. So not only are we trying to prepare believers, but we're trying to tell unbelievers, hey man, this is going to go down. This is bad. You need to get saved. Right. So it ruins our witness, man. And we're touting conspiracy theories. What do you think the secular world's thinking? Well, these guys are crazy, man. These guys are nut jobs. And so we're losing people. And think about the ramifications. Is it possible that someone could say, you know what, you Christians are crazy. You're conspiratorial. I don't want anything to do with you. The rapture happens, and they get thrown into the tribulation, obviously, and have to go through the nightmare. Hey man, you contributed to that person making that decision of not accepting the gospel. You contributed to that. Now they have to bear responsibility for not accepting the gospel, but at the end of the day, I want to be a stumbling block to unbelievers from accepting Christ because I'm an idiot and I follow conspiracy theories. Hey man, I'm sorry, you're going to have to answer for that one too. That you cause stumbling blocks not only to brethren, but to unbelievers as well. That's scary. I wouldn't want to be you.
Another interesting point that I've observed is if I offer a challenge to someone that's pushing a conspiracy theory, whether it's a theory that there was no plane that ever smacked into the Twin Towers and on 9/11, or whether it's the King James only conspiracy theory, or the flat Earth, or wherever you're going to go with this, or that the U.S. and the British government both knew about Pearl Harbor beforehand and let all those sailors die so that they could justify America going into World War II. You've got all these conspiracy theories. Well, it's such a frustrating situation for me, because when I address these on a regular basis, the person that's trying to instruct me on the better way, as soon as I show any reticence to receive it, despite the fact they haven't given me a strong biblical argument, despite the fact that they can't give me a real significant pile of evidence, they can just give me some little talking points. Well, they accuse me of being an unbeliever, of being an apostate, of not following Christ, of not loving the truth, of loving the darkness, of being part of the Antichrist system. Really? I'm part of the Antichrist system because I reject the flat Earth, or because I don't believe that 9/11 is a hoax? No, I am sorry.
I know, and I got the same backlash too when I did a conspiracy theory thing, prophecy update a while back. Lee, I was shocked that people would go down that path of, you're an unbeliever, you're part of the Antichrist system. Hey man, what are we talking about here, dude? What's wrong with you? Do you have mental illness? I mean, you can't even agree to disagree, can you? I mean, you got to go and do the ad hominem attacks and say you're not a believer. I mean, wow, really? Then my challenge to you is, what kind of believer are you that would actually challenge someone's salvation based on some crazy conspiracy theory? Really? Wow. And the denial of a flat Earth, or denial of, that in 9/11 was an inside job by the Jews, all of a sudden puts me in the camp of an antichrist or an unbeliever. Dude, I'm serious, man. That person needs to check themselves. That's a problem. That's a serious spiritual problem to do that.
It'd be one thing if they just said, well, here, you need to read these 2 books. You'll get some good information, get you some good leads, and you get yourself a good education. But I almost never hear that.
No, I know. And Lee, I've done the conspiracy thing and pointing those things out, and then I'll show, well, this is where this person got this evidence from, and it's illegitimate. It's no good. It's Islamic, and it's nation. Really, what the whole 9/11, the Jews, the 5 Jews that did the inside job is a Nation of Islam tactic of anti-Semitism. To say that, and you point that out, and well, this is where the person got the information, and the whole thing is anti-Semitic, and it's tied to the Nation of Islam. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's got to be true. It's got to be true. And it's like, all right, man, then I'm done trying to show anybody the evidence and the facts and where this person got this information. If you don't want to believe that, then I'm sorry. Then live in fantasy world. Go ahead. But understand this. As a believer, all of us, including myself, has to account to the Lord for pure doctrine. When I stand before the Lord, He's going to ask me, why did you not get this one right? Why did you not know this? And we're all going to have to give an account on why we believed lies and not the truth, and that goes into our rewards as well. So it's important to have right doctrine, and then be able to believe, reality. But man, if you put yourself out of reality, you're going to be held to account for that as a believer. You don't get off on that one. Jesus says it's not going to say, you know what, boys will be boys, and I get it, man. You were all caught up, and your emotions were all involved, and I get it.
For the excitement.
Yeah, it was fun and stuff like that. You wanted to kind of be on the inside. I get you. No, you're not going to have that conversation. You're going to get the biggest tongue lashing you ever got, and you're going to lose rewards. So there's a lot at stake here to be right. It's a lot at stake to have our theology straightened out. And I can't overemphasize that more. you don't get off on not having your theology right. So believers beware. You have the Bema seat. People misunderstand the Bema seat. It is a reward, judgment. But it is not going. It's not like going to my kid's soccer party at the pizza parlor and everyone's getting a trophy. It's not that. You will be examined. And every work will be examined, not for salvation because you're a believer, but for reward, our loss of reward. And as 1 Corinthians points out in chapter 3, some people's works will be burned because he can't reward them for that. And That's so right. It's a serious deal.
Well, we've brought her up to 9:30, brother. Maybe we should move on to Q&A.
Okay, go for it.
All right. So, do we have any questions here ready to roll? We do have a few here from Carly. Okay. Questions. If we don't have a Speaker of the House, we can't declare war, which means if Iran or anyone else comes on Israel, the U.S. can back out. Is this correct?
Well, technically, I guess so, but they've done it in the past. They without Congress, they've actually went to war sometimes. So, are we talking de facto or de jure?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
You know what I mean? You have to understand that they're going to do what they want to do, whether or not, and they can just do, well, we're not really going to go to war. We're going to do this. We're going to do this military thing, but they can sidestep this pretty easy. So that's not a concern.
Yeah,
I don't think the Biden administration.
Yeah, and personally, I don't think that we're going to see Iran step into this present situation right now with military might. She does not want to face Israel alone. She'll probably be willing to face Israel if she's got Turkey and Russia and a bunch of other nations with her, but by herself, she knows that she'll take a beating.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Glee, on that one, is that she's not going to do it. She's not going to make a move without Russia and Turkey. She's not doing that. You're totally right. She's not going to act unilaterally.
No, she likes to act through her proxies, encourage them to go get in a fight, and then watch them get beat up, and then just put a bandage on them and give them some more AKs and some more ammo.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that one.
Do you think Satan knows that he will lose this war with God?
No, I don't think he knows. I think what you have to realize with the nature of evil is it makes you insane.
That's right.
And I really don't, I'm not trying to disparage. I'm not supposed to disrespect the fallen angels or whatnot. I'm not supposed to talk lightly of them. But to understand Satan is to understand kind of like a megalomaniac. A megalomaniac thinks that they're going to win and rule the world. And I think that's the nature of sin, is it takes you to a place where you're now almost mentally insane. Because it is insane. Once you boil down sin, it doesn't make sense that anyone would rebel against God. It's insanity. And the further you move away from God, the more insane you become. And so I don't think at his level at this point that he's thinking sanely. I mean, he's a created being and he thinks he can actually go against the Almighty. That seems insane to me. But that's what insane people do. It's the same type of person that you see on the street that think they're Superman. And and they're invincible and they're bulletproof and they're faster than a speeding bullet, because that's a mental insanity. Well, that's what sin does to people, and him being the father of lies and whatnot, he has fully convinced himself and his demons and that fallen angels that they can win. They really believe that. So that's why else would he fight this war against God if he didn't think he could win?
Here's another interesting question. What do you say to a fellow Christian who doesn't want to talk about prophecy because they know what's coming and they have unbelieving family?
Yeah. Well, I think what you have to do is you always want to make yourself available. If they don't want to talk about it, say, well, when you are ready to talk about it, I'm here and I will fill you in. But I would also tell them, look, man, if you want to be prepared, the best thing to do is understand the reality, because you will not only help yourself, but you will be able to help your family. So it's incumbent upon you. You're responsible for knowing information, even though it's not the greatest thing to know. It's bad in a lot of ways. It's bittersweet in other ways. But I would challenge that person, saying, well, if I were you, if you had cancer and I was your doctor, would you want me to tell you have cancer? And I would assume the guy would say, yes, I want you to tell me. Well, the world has cancer.
That's right.
And it's dying, and we can pretend that it doesn't, but it's not going to change the reality of what's going to happen. So I would say this: if the person says, well, I don't want to hear you, well, just say, look, I will be available to you when reality hits your doorstep, because it's going to. And I think that the reality is, whether it's Israel or whether that's the digital currency or whatever it might be, it's going to come to everyone's door, and they were going to have to face it at some point in time. So you just say, I'm available when you're ready. Let reality make them ready.
Here's a question. What's the difference between Islamic Jihad and Hamas?
Well, Islamic Jihad. Now here's the funny thing: is they'll interpret it two ways. Okay. And the question then is, how does real Islam interpret jihad? I mean, some Islamic people will interpret jihad as a personal struggle, and that's what they'll convey it as. And those what we call are nominal Muslims. Okay, but when you really study the Quran and the Hadith and the real practitioners of the Quran, jihad is allowed in times of war. Well, then who determines when they're in war? Well, some of them say we're in war perpetually, all the time, and that they have a right to jihad during that times of war. Now, some people will say, some Muslims will say, no, in times of war, it has to be a real war, and then we can do jihad and kill people for Allah's cause. But some believe they're in a perpetual war, that they're in a state of war, and that's Hamas. They believe they're in a state of war. And believe it or not, Hamas is actually the one following the Quran to the tidbit. They are the ones actually the real practitioners of Islam. This is what this religion teaches. And think about this: their Mahdi, their 12th Imam, or their Jesus that comes. I mean, it's weird, but and I'm not saying the Antichrist is Islamic, but their Mahdi is like our Antichrist. Their Jesus is like our false prophet. I mean, when Jesus comes back for them, he's like, here's the Jews, go out there and kill him. He's under a rock. Oh, Muslim, come kill him. It's like, what? And it's kind of weird that our bad guy is their good guy. So, one of my good friends that was killed over this was Phil Haney, and he would work for the Department of Homeland Security, and he was watching the jihadis, and he would say, Brandon, these guys that you see, these terrorists, they're the ones who are following Islam faithfully. Don't believe the ones that are nominal. It's the ones who are actually practicing this, is actually what Muhammad actually did when he conquered Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. When Islam was actively doing this, that's what happened.
Now, if Brandon was giving the difference between jihad and then Hamas with your lukewarm or backslidden Muslims, but if the questioner was actually asking what's the difference between the sect known as Hamas and the sect in Palestine or the Gaza known as Islamic Jihad, the differences.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
The differences are just philosophical differences on how to conduct the battle. They're both militant. They both believe in a one-state solution, which is Palestine only, no Jews. If you just Google Islamic Jihad versus Hamas, you'll come up with the nitty-gritty details on the differences between them. They're not real significant, but they're different enough that they have two distinct parties there.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you were talking about the activity of jihad. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, I didn't realize you're asking the question about the different organization. Yes. Yeah, so Lee's right. It's philosophical differences, but not much.
Okay, I am wondering if you all see this as possibly the final battle between the seed of Abraham before God brings in his move to hook Gog and get the end started to fulfill his covenant with Abraham. So the final battle between the different children of Abraham. I see where she's going. The final battle between Ishmael and Israel. Is this the final battle?
Well, I think it's a stage setting, and really the final battle. If we put it could be a series of battles, obviously culminating with the last one as Armageddon. What we start realizing is, starting with Psalm 83 invasion, even Gog of Magog. Gog of Magog is the non-Arab invasion, but Psalm 83 is an all-Arab invasion. But what we start realizing is, when you start looking at the different prophets, Obadiah, Ezekiel, all the other prophets, about where do the Arab nations end up, it's not a pretty picture. And whether that's through the series of different battles. I mean, there's 3 world wars in the tribulation. There's a lot of things that happen. So within all these different invasions, Psalm 83, all these other things, I can tell you the end result. The end result is that the situation is rectified in 3 ways according to Scripture. 1, Israel occupies the Arab territory. 2, the Arab group comes to faith in Messiah. And 3, destruction.
That's right.
And those are the 3 elements that we see from what happens to the Arab people, the descendants of Ishmael. Now, here's the thing. It's not pretty. For instance, I'll give you some examples. There are no more Edomites, descendants of Esau, on the face of the planet ever again once it's all over. There's
That's
nothing.
right.
There's no descendants. Ammon and Moab are partially destroyed, and there is a remnant that gets saved out of Moab and Ammon. Lebanon, we don't know what happens. We just know Israel occupies Lebanon. And then with Saudi Arabia, the Saudi Arabia is actually a desolation and a scattering of them. The land of Saudi Arabia will no longer be inhabited, and it's destruction. Basically, there's no one left. Egypt has a destruction and then a conversion, and then Egypt is then scattered for 40 years in the 1,000-year rule of Christ, and then they're brought back after 40 years. And Egypt gets partial destruction, revival, and desolation. And there's some more I can mention, but but I think you get the hint. There's not much left when it's all said and done. And what you start realizing, and I think Dr. Fruchtenbaum made the point, that the closer the descendant is to Israel, the more they get hammered. The more animosity they actually have towards Israel. Just like the descendants of Esau are closer in genetic lines to Israel than even Ishmael, but they get hammered the worst. There is no more Edomites ever again. I mean, they're completely wiped out as a people group when it's all said and done. And don't get this wrong. The prophets say to Esau that he has been given a chance to come to God, and that he does not do it, and therefore it leaves God with no choice other than to wipe the Edomites completely off the face of the planet. And so it's not that God doesn't give them a chance. He does. Please believe that the prophets even talk about that. So it's not a pretty picture, guys. It's not a pretty picture.
Where do you get your world news?
Where will I get my world news? Lee. I get it from Lee Brainerd. I get it from him. But no, what starts happening is I have about 100 news feeds. and I can't go through all of them, but I have about 100 news feeds that I pipe into on a daily basis if I can. And I get these news feeds coming in, feeding me what the current events are and stuff like that. If you want to know the 100 news feeds that I have, just go to my website on Rock Harbor Church, go to resources, and I'll show you all the news feeds that I follow and all the Bible studies and whatnot on there as well. But that's usually what I'm doing. I don't typically follow people that just give me videos that are undocumented. I don't, stuff like that. And a lot of people send me videos and stuff like that, but it's undocumented. I don't know where to go with it. So I typically go to news groups because I know their stuff I can trust most of the time, and I can see it in 3 different locations. And like the Bible says, you got to have 2 or 3 witnesses. And so even on news stories, you're gonna have to have at least 2 or 3 witnesses. But go to my website for that list.
All right. Lee, please explain Isaiah 18. Well, I'll let you have first crack at it, Brandon, even though they asked for me.
Let me read it then.
Yes. This is the chapter concerning Cush in Ethiopia.
Yeah, I thought usually the question is Isaiah 17. Woe to the land that shadowed the rivers of Ethiopia, inhabitants of the world and dwellers of the earth, all that. What you start realizing, if this is a proclamation against Ethiopia, then again, maybe we're talking that this might include the Gog of Magog invasion, because Sudan or Ethiopia is involved in the battle of Gog and Magog. They're one of the alliances in that battle. So my best guess, okay, I'm speculating where to put Isaiah 18, and I speculate about Isaiah 17 because I don't know where to put the destruction of Damascus either. But I'll speculate. I think Isaiah 18, if that's just about the destruction of Ethiopia, then I would put it in with the Gog of Magog battle. That's the only place I can figure out how to put that. Destruction of Damascus, that might come with Psalm 83.
That's where I put it.
It could be part of that. So again, this is where we have to ask you as a student, and that this is our best guess. Because what we see here, there's nothing to tag it onto. There's not an event to tag it on. Well, this is part of this. So we're speculating at that point. So I just want to make that disclaimer.
It's also interesting that in this chapter, there's a present brought to the Lord from the people that are tall and smooth of skin. So it does seem that after they get their judgment, there's a remnant saved out of them too.
It seems to be, yeah, absolutely, and so yeah, it's some of this is hard. That's just where it's difficult in the world of prophecy. Of like, okay, where do we put this one at? And so Lee and I are doing our best to place it somewhere, and I think that's where we take an educated guess based on what we know about Gog and Magog, and perhaps place it there. But I could be wrong.
Yep. Sometimes with these prophetic events, it's in the last days. You don't know exactly where it goes in the last days. That's okay. It's quite often with some of these issues, we have to not focus that we're not trying to hit the bullseye dead on. If you're always trying to have everything dead on the bullseye, you're going to end up jumping to rash conclusions. You exclude what's obviously wrong, and then what's left, you just hold loosely and say, Lord, I believe this, but I don't know exactly how it fits in. I'm just going to go along for the ride and see what happens. Yeah,
a good point. And even like when you jump over to chapter 19 in Isaiah, I mean, there's parts of it, like even Dr. Fruchtenbaum points out, that was fulfilled even in Israel's lifetime in 1948 with some of Egypt's leaders. And then he talks about if you read in Isaiah 19, about the fear in Egypt forever attacking Israel again. And even Dr. Fruchtenbaum will note that that might be something that has happened to Egypt in our present day and time. And that's why you don't see Egypt getting involved anymore with Israel's affairs, because the fear that when they did, they got routed, they got throttled by Israel. And so even he points out that that fear that Isaiah talks about with Egypt is on, like, right now. Right. And then it continues into the future. And so it's a good speculation, and I think it's a good observation. Are we 100% sure? No. But I think it's very good speculation on his part, and I would agree with that, you know. But again, we're not 100% sure.
I'm unclear why surrounding Arab countries don't want Palestinian Arabs in their countries. Can you explain?
Yeah, because they cause them problems too, man. It's just, look, Jordan even doesn't even want to deal with them. And look, man, you have obviously nominal Muslims and cultural Muslims in different parts of the Arab world. But when you bring these types of in, the Muslim world doesn't even want ISIS in their life. They don't want these crazy death cult terrorists, right? And that's what Hamas and all of them have become, Hezbollah and whatever. And so they don't want to deal with them in their own society, because these guys will turn on them too for not being more radical like them. And so they don't want them either. They would rather them stay and be a thorn in Israel's side into a territory that's not in their land, but in, outside of that territory. And so they can be a problem for Israel. They don't want this problem themselves, because these types of guys will go after the leadership in Jordan, will go after the leadership in Lebanon or whatever. And they're like, we don't want this, man. So they have become problem children, no doubt about it. And basically, they're the redheaded stepchild of the Arabs. That's really what's happened to them.
Yep. Why would anyone want thugs and thieves?
Yeah, I mean, in any society, right? And so even in Arab society, they're like, we don't want these people.
Yeah.
And then think about this: what the United States has proposed. Some crazy guy, I can't remember his name. Hey, we'll take them in. We'll take all the. What are you crazy? We don't want them over here either. What's wrong with you?
No. It's
just,
I just shake my head thinking of that. My head doesn't even want to compute that. It's like, are you guys on drugs?
Yeah, you've got to be insane. You're going to bring the death cult to America? Look, we already have problems in Dearborn, Michigan, and other places in the United States where they have not assimilated. Even Henry Kissinger came out. Henry Kissinger, the globalist, came out and says, hey, man, this whole thing about multiculturalism and bringing the Muslims into Europe and bringing them into America, it's failed. They're not accepting the values. They stay in their own enclaves, and this has become a problem. Henry Kissinger said that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we see that in America. And look, I was in Europe just a while back. I was in Frankfurt, Germany, and I saw more hijabs there than I did Germans. They've taken over. It's a problem. So, to your question, that's why. Just like we wouldn't want them, they don't want them either.
Why do some prophecy teachers discount Psalm 83? I think they're asking why they think it's not prophecy.
Good question. I don't know, honestly. And they say it was fulfilled a long time ago or something like that in history. And my thing is, I've never seen that in history fulfilled. And then you got to, I think there's 9 players involved in that. And that those 9 players have never attacked at once.
That's right.
Yeah. And so, Bill Salas was really on the cutting edge of this a long time ago when he broke through with his first book called Israelistine. And it's a good book to read, obviously. But then people have then tried to modify this. And at their attempts, well, this happened in 1948. And it's like, well, you only had 5 Arab nations that attacked you in 1948, not 9. And well, this happened in successive battles of 48, 67, Yom Kippur, and whatnot. So, whoa, wait a second. That's not what the psalmist says. The psalmist says that they conspired together at one time, basically, to attack Israel and to wipe them out from being a people. That's never happened in history. So I don't know why they don't want to consider it. I don't know. I just know this. When that goes down, when the psalmist prays what he prays towards the end of Psalm 83, that actually is answered with the results that I talked about the end of basically many of the Arab people, where only there's a remnant of pockets of Arab people that come to faith and go on into the kingdom. It's not a pretty picture.
That's right.
So I don't know. I don't know. I really can't answer you that.
Yeah, it's easier to explain what they believe than it is to explain why they believe it.
Yeah, you're right. Good point. Good point. And sometimes there's just weird motives, and you got to understand there's a lot of motives out there that not so much theological, but coming from different schools of thought, or someone has a theological bent, or someone has an agenda, or someone has an axe to grind. And this is the weird thing I find out in theology, that some people are holding positions because they have an axe to grind with somebody else. And it's weird, just weird. It's not because they exegeted the passage and say, okay, this is what it says. It's like, I'm going to get back at my daddy, so I'm going to hold the opposite position of my daddy. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
I'm serious, man. That's how some people are. It's so stupid, but that's how they are.
To me, when I look at the end of Psalm 83, it ends with the absolute decimation of those Arab nations and a remnant converted to the God of Israel.
Yes, that's it. Mm-hmm.
We don't see that today. This is 6th grade level logic. If we don't see that today, then this is not history. It's still prophecy.
That's right. There you go. And that's what you're left to conclude. So
now here's a question. The war that we're seeing in Israel, if it's not right now, if it's not the Psalm 83 war, could it be Ezekiel 38 and 39?
Well, I think what you're seeing here is it's a lead up to all of that.
That's right.
And I think that's a more broader approach rather than saying this is that. I think what you have to start taking a step back and saying whatever is going on here, it sets up these different invasions, and it does set up Gog of Magog. It does set up Psalm 83. What comes first? Well, I'm of the opinion with Bill Salas that Psalm 83 comes before Gog of Magog. That's just the way it is. And there's a disagreement. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of good people that disagree. Some people that put Gog of Magog in the tribulation. I don't. I see it as a pre-tribulational event, but we can agree to disagree. I think what the better take on all of this is saying there's a direct line. I think the better take on it is let's see how this plays out. No doubt it sets things up.
That's
I
right.
think that's a statement we all can agree with. How it sets it up, let's see how that plays out. And I think that's the key on all of this. A watcher on the wall keeps watching. And every day as something develops, okay, more is added, and then I can add more, and then I can get a clearer picture. And what happens is the more you let things develop, the sharper focus things become. And then you can start seeing the pattern. So I think it's premature to jump in saying, this is that. I think you're better off saying it sets things up.
Yep. And if someone was going to ask me to make a bet on the current situation, my bet would be that Israel is going to be restricted by our allies from finishing the job right now. Now, I could be wrong there. This could easily continue to expand and grow and go in the direction of the Psalm 83 morph in that way. It might, but I would put my money on this thing leaving the explosive situation to continue to smolder behind the scenes.
And I agree with you. I don't think it's a mistake that Blinken had an 8-hour meeting with Israel. That wasn't a happy meeting. That was a threat from the United States. And I think that's what Israel was going to go in there and do it. And now they're going to be restricted, basically, and restrained because of this. Absolutely.
Please address Revelation 3:9 People are using this verse to say that Israel is evil and we shouldn't support Israel. And that verse says, "Indeed, I make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet and to know that I have loved you."
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a real stretch to say something like that. But yeah, let's explain it. Well, in 95 AD, when Philadelphia is dealing with it, it's Jew on Jew persecution. That's what was happening historically at the time. It's not happening right now, but so we know that historically that was happening, and it was Jewish believers being persecuted by non-Jewish believers. Okay, so that's what the early church's persecution started out, and then obviously the Roman persecution. Okay, so that's what it's referring to. But if we take that in principle and application, then how do we apply it today? Well, it's not so much the Jews doing that to us. It's anyone claiming to be the people of God and that we're not. That they're making the point that we're not the Christ followers, that they're the real persons that are following God. And really, what it is, it's a hearkening back to "Thou shalt not take the Lord's the Lord's name in vain." And the idea is carrying the name of God and doing things in His malicious things, evil things in His name, thinking as if you're doing something for God, like the Pharisees were doing, right? That they think they're doing a favor for God by doing what they were doing. And so when you put this out in an application, it's Islam, it's the cults, it's the world religions that think that they're the people of God. And it's even the cults inside Christianity. It's the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons saying we're the people of God and you're not. And so what he's promising is that to the Philadelphia church, the remnant church, is that, hey, I know this is being said about you, but these people are being, the synagogue of Satan means that Satan is actually working through them against you, and for them saying that. And so at the end of the day, you have all these people telling you and I, we're not the true followers of Christ, that they are, or whoever it might be, some cult. And at the end of the day, what he promises us is that one day I'm going to have them bow down before me and admit that you were right and they were wrong. That's really what he's trying to say here.
Yeah, we can't be the true church because we've taken the mark of the beast. We worship on Sunday.
Yeah, it's Seventh-day Adventists. It's those types of things that, and what do all the cults do? They always claim that they're the new Israel, don't they? They always, whether it's Seventh-day Adventists, Mormons, Catholics, you name it, they're all the new church, right? I'm sorry, the new Israel. They're the ones that take the spiritual blessings from Israel. So the funny thing is, he's saying they're a synagogue of Satan. So it's not necessarily Jews. It's anyone saying that we're the new Israel, we're the people of God, and you're not. And so that's how you interpret that properly. And you can see how people can misuse that and make it anti-Semitic, right?
Here's a question I'm not exactly sure. It's like threefold question here, and I'm not exactly sure what their point is. Most distrust Microsoft News, MSM, but they do seem to be accurately reporting what is going on in Israel. Now, I'm not aware of that because I haven't been to their website in, for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Can you comment on God witnessing to the remnant so that we could discern the times? I think they're asking, okay, so news can be confusing. So how do we know what God's trying to communicate to us so we can properly understand the times?
Okay. Well, be careful watching MSN because I call them MSLSD because a lot of times they don't report the facts and they skew what's going on in Israel. So be careful about them. Very careful about them. So I can't really comment because I don't watch MSNBC at all because of that. I will say this: how do we discern the signs of the times? Well, the first thing you have to understand is you have to understand the Bible.
Yes.
So you take what your knowledge of the Bible, and then you can apply it to what's going on in the world, and that is the only way you can discern things. You don't want to do what we call newspaper eschatology, to where you watch the news and then you reinterpret things back in Scripture. You don't want to do that. So you have to start with a foundation of understanding prophecy, and then you can venture out to do that. Now, here's the thing. You might say, well, I'm not well versed in that. Okay, then that's fine. So then listen to good prophecy teachers that have spent years in the study, and let them connect the dots for you. And again, you got to know who the good prophecy teachers are. But before you do your own, which is fine, you've got to know your own prophecy. You've got to know what eschatology is. You've got to understand how to interpret things, right? And so always go back to the word. It's always about that. That's the foundation. You've got to have your foundation. If not, you're going to end up doing what we call newspaper eschatology.
Was this attack God humbling the secular Jews to turn them back to himself, or was it Satan leading the Jews to worship the Antichrist?
I think what you start seeing is it's a combination of both. I mean, it's God allowing this, right?
Yes.
And then it's allowing Satan to do this, right? To get them into the hands of the Antichrist, which is foretold. But what is the whole point? The whole point is to break the power of Israel, which is Daniel chapter 12, I think, verse 7. And if you read that passage, this is about Israel's breaking. There's no doubt about it. I love the Jews, and I want all of them to be saved. But Israel, just like we have to be broken, Israel will have to be broken as a nation to call on the Messiah to save them, right? And so yeah, this is all leading towards the humbling of Israel. Okay, so to get them to that state. And right now, they still, you can rely on their military. They can rely on their ingenuity. They can rely on a lot of things right now, okay, other than God. I had an interesting story that someone told me today about a Jewish man in El Salvador that they met. And the Jewish man was like, we're going to go back. We're going to take care of Hamas. This is no problem. We always do this. We got this one. But he said, I don't believe in God. They asked him if he believed in God, and they said, yeah, I don't believe in God. But in his mind, though, he's going to go back. They're going to take care of Hamas, and we're going to deal with this. And you can see that, and you felt bad for the guy because you can see the self-confidence in the Israeli military and them as a people, and they're great. But the concept of, well, I don't believe in God. Oh, buddy, please don't go there. Because that is exactly the reason this is happening, because you are too self-reliant. It's just like us on a personal level. What does God have to do to break us down? We have to land flat on our back till we're humbled, and we have to cry out to him, right? So it's the same thing happening. So this is building up to that.
Amen. Respond to those who claim that religious zealots are making things happen on purpose to force the fulfillment of prophecy. And they give, for an example, religious zealots on October 7th intentionally are trying to start a Psalm 83 war or the Gog and Magog war.
Well, there might be some people that want to kickstart things off, but I'm telling you what, if we really believe God is in control, it's going to be according to his timing, and not some goofy guy that tries to kick off the Battle of Armageddon. Like, that's for sure. We really have no way of setting anything in motion. It is God setting all this in motion, and it's according to his timing, and his plan to bring this about. And so don't worry about that. They can act a fool all they want, but they're not going to force the hand of God to do anything outside of his timing. Don't worry about that.
The other thing I'm thinking is, I can't imagine the Hamas soldiers intentionally trying to start the Psalm 83 war. They don't believe the Bible's the word of God in the first place. And why would they want to precipitate a war that's going to ultimately end in their desolation?
Yeah, right. And so, yeah, they're totally unaware. And again, what do we call them again? They're useful idiots for Satan. And, he's going to give them into a fever pitch to where they ally together and say, let's wipe them out from being a Jew, from being a people. And so, God's in control of that timing, and he's going to allow Satan to inspire that, no doubt about that. And so you'll see that the both and the real illustration of this is what God allowed Satan to do to Job, right? So God's in control, and he tells Satan what the limits are, what he can do to Job, right? And I think you have to keep that in mind when you're dealing with the prophecy world. It appears like Satan's, off the leash doing what he wants to do, but he actually is not. He's on the leash, and he can only do what God allows him to do. And so you got to keep that in mind.
That's exactly right. Here's another question. This channel and Prophecy Watchers believes that the Gog and Magog war is well, they say here the pre-trib event. I don't. Yeah, okay, pre-trib. Yep. And then Hal Lindsey places it in the trib, and others have it being the same as the Millennium War. So I think they have it at the end. So how would you clarify this situation? When is the Gog and Magog war going to happen?
Well, my opinion, and let me make sure everyone knows that, because there's disagreement in all of this, right? So if we can agree to disagree. The reason I placed it in a pre-trib situation because of the timing element in Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is a 7-year cleanup. And my estimation and deduction by reading that is, okay, so Israel's going to be cleaning up the weapons and burning the weapons for 7 years. Okay, so let's then, if I project into the tribulation, I know at least at the midpoint of the tribulation, Israel's not going to be cleaning up any weapons because Israel's on the run from the Antichrist at that point in time. And I don't think they're going to be worried about cleaning up weapons if he's trying to kill every Jew on the planet. So that's why I don't place it in the tribulation. And I would place it before the tribulation because you have to have a 7-year cleanup of the weapons. And I can see the cleanup of the weapons in the first half of the tribulation, but I just can't see it in the second half when they're on the run from the Antichrist. And that's why I place it pre-tribulational. Now, there's disagreement. Some people place it at the beginning of the tribulation, at the end. I don't see it at the end. I think the revolt that's talked about happens at the end of the millennium. And I think John is using what we call literal plus application. I think it's called a drosh, I think it is, in Hebrew. And he's saying this last invasion that happens at the end of the millennial kingdom is like the Gog of Magog war. That's how you read it in Revelation chapter 20, a literal plus application. So I don't think it's there either. Again, I could be wrong, but that's why I place it there.
And I think the Bible uses Gog and Magog at the end of the millennium as a representation of the evil kingdom coming against the kingdom of God, because when the Lord comes at the second coming, he destroys the whole entire image, hits them in the feet in the Roman Empire, but the Greeks and the Persians and the Babylonians, the whole thing is destroyed. And so that's permanently gone. The Babylonian was the empire that God ordained for a while, then the Medes, then the Persians, and then the Romans. The northern hordes from all of those empires continually came down and fought against the God-ordained government. They're going to do the same thing again at the end of the millennium. And I think that's why they have that name attached there. They're going to come against God's ordained empire.
Yes, amen.
So if Israel is at peace and safety in unwalled villages prior to the Ezekiel war, how do we see this playing out? Because right now the terror groups, there's no peace and safety.
Well, I think that's where I agree with a guy like Bill Salas, and I put the Psalm 83 invasion before Gog of Magog. And again, this is all speculation. You got to understand that. But the unwalled villages, and I can't remember the Hebrew word. It's batach, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's militarily secure, and it's not like shalom. It's not peace like shalom. It's military peace. It's military security.
Yes.
That's how the Hebrew word is being translated in that situation, which makes sense that if Psalm 83 has happened and the resultant is that Israel has decimated the Arab nations after that invasion, which according to Ezekiel, it's a military conquest of Israel over the Arab nations in that invasion, then Israel then will truly be militarily secure because they have pretty much eliminated all their Arab neighbors from ever attacking again. And, like Bill Salas points out with some of the prophets, Israel expands their boundaries into the territories of Lebanon and Jordan and even Saudi Arabia and the Sinai because of this invasion. And therefore, they are totally militarily secure at that point in time, which then precipitates, obviously, Gog of Magog. So that's why I place it there. It seems to be the best fit.
Does it look to any of you like Israel will ever have peace again?
Not in this dispensation. They'll have a temporary false peace with the Antichrist for 3.5 years, but that's going to be shattered. And so really there is no peace until the Prince of Peace gets here and sets up his kingdom, and then he protects Israel and they become the head of the nations, not the tail. So not in this dispensation. They finally get their peace in the Messianic dispensation, in the kingdom stage.
Do you see China taking down Taiwan as the next big event?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, things seem to be ramping up in that area, and I think we have all these war fronts, not only with Russia but with China, and quite frankly, they know we're weak in America. They know that we can't fight multiple battlefronts. We already have a front with Ukraine, and we're getting low on our ammunitions, and we're getting low on we're already low on our strategic oil reserves. So China's watching this, and they're saying these guys can't fight another war front. And then if we get involved with Israel or whatever, or we have things devoted to them, that China would be a third front.
Yeah.
And they know we can't deal with that. So I think they probably will. I don't see anything stopping China from doing something like this.
I think they're just waiting for a time when we've got too many irons in the fire, and they'll exploit it.
Totally. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
This is a different kind of question than we usually get. I was supposed to leave for Israel today and had money converted into shekels. Where can I donate the shekels I have without converting it back to U.S. currency so it won't be worth less?
I have no idea, man.
I would say just save it for your next trip to Israel, or you can check around and find some born again Messianic Jewish believer that's heading back to Israel and give it to him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, or somebody like that, or talk to Chosen People Ministries. I mean, they might know something like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Chosen People.
Call them. I think their offices are in Florida, and call them and ask them. They might have a good idea what to do with the shekels.
What is the timing of Zechariah 12?
Well, Zechariah 12 obviously is the tribulation period, and where all nations come against her, and so when you see right now that all the nations are coming against her, it just continues to build to that point where they have nobody, and they're isolated. And right now, yeah, America's saying we're friends and we got your back, and Blinken gets up there in front and says, well, yeah, we're always going to be with you, which they're really not, but it's going to come a point in the tribulation where there's no one to help them because the Antichrist has turned on them. There's no nations to rescue them. And literally they will have to call Jesus to save them. He'll be the only one to save them.
That'll be the best phone call they ever made.
It will be it's the best call they ever have made, because he says, "You shall not see me again until you learn to say, 'Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.'" And they will. They will. It's funny. I heard a guy, interesting enough, that was his family is a Jewish man. He was his teenager, and his family got slaughtered right in front of him, and he actually hid, and he survived. And he said that he was praying that any God, whoever he was, would rescue them. And I thought that was interesting, that he like he said, I didn't care which God it was, that God would, whoever he is, rescue him. And I thought that that's very interesting. That's almost the desperation that is required for Israel to finally ask for Jesus.
Amen.
And I saw that in his heart, that, hey, I don't care what the rabbis say. It's just what any God that's going to come rescue me, who is this God? And I thought, ooh, that's it. He got to that point of desperation that he was willing to suspend his Judaism for the God who would actually save him, which we know is going to be the Jewish Messiah, right? And I thought that was amazing. Wow. I was kind of eye-opening for me.
If Zechariah is the second coming, how will those who pierced the Lord be able to look upon him when the unbelievers aren't going to be resurrected until after 1,000 years?
Well, you got to remember, look upon him as a Jewish idiom. Look upon him means believe in him. And so it's not that, well, we see him coming in the heavens and then we believe on him. Hosea chapter 6 talks about that Israel looks upon him in faith 3 days prior to the second coming, and they actually call the nation to repent of their denial of him for 3 days, according to Hosea chapter 6. So Israel, has to be saved spiritually first, and then they call him to save him physically. And that's what Joel points out. And you got to make sure you have the transactions in order. It's saved spiritually first, and then rescue physically. Now, the funny thing is, Paul will mention this in the order in Romans chapter 11. How will they call on him if they haven't believed? And he will show you that order. You have to believe first before you can call on him. And the calling on him is going back to Joel, and the idea that once they are saved spiritually, then they will ask Messiah to rescue them physically. And that's where you have Psalm 79, Psalm 80, where they say, oh, that you would rend the heavens and come down, O shepherd of Israel, and save us. And that will be actually their calling upon him. And then what they're confessing, if you want to know what they confess, it's real simple. It's Isaiah 53. That's their confession. That's what the national Israel leaders call Israel to do. Isaiah 53 that's the confession, and then after that they call on him. So that's the order.
I'm not sure what the next question is going after, but it is, when do you believe the Islamic Jihad camps will be activated?
Like in America or Israel, or
I'm not sure. I mean, there's some little groups of jihadists here in America, and they're in Canada, they're in Europe. Are they going to be activated in the future? I don't
know. I mean, they tried to activate them last Friday, on Friday the 13th. Remember that? The leader of Hamas or whatever tried to activate them, and there were a few stabbings here and there in the world, but nothing happened. I don't know. I mean, what's going to... We'll have to see what they do to Hamas and how the Arab world and the Islamic world react to Israel taking Hamas completely out. Yep. And I think that's when you'll know what they're planning on doing as far as if the sleeper cells are going to be activated. I think the problem is we have enough sleeper cells that if they wanted to do something, they could, and it can cause a lot of terror in a lot of people. And this has been the problem. We have allowed this, and not only in the Americas, or in America and Canada, but Europe has allowed this. And I mean, you saw what happened in London and in Australia and different places like that. I mean, there was massive demonstration for Hamas, which was shocking and fearful to see that in the streets of London or wherever, and even here in America. So I think there's more of a problem here. And remember, they've already said it. We'll go after the little Satan first, and then we'll go after the big Satan, and that's America. And everyone needs to understand that.
Yep, no doubt about it. Here's another question. Are you seeing a change in tone in the U.S.'s support of Israel?
Yeah, a big one. I see that with people in our State Department, foreign policy. I see with the Biden administration. And I can tell you this. I'm part of the Israeli consulate meeting in Southern California, and the Israeli consulate meets with us periodically about twice a year in Southern California. And their concern that has been expressed to us because of what they see is a change, not only in American politics with supporting Israel, but in evangelicals. That was their concern. That's why they wanted to talk to all of us pro-Israel pastors. And their concern is we are seeing an increasing amount of evangelicals not having the same support as they once did. Can you guys please explain this to us? And they added, we're seeing it among your younger generation evangelicals. Well, yeah, they hit the nail on the head. They're absolutely right. It is the younger evangelicals that are not showing any support whatsoever for the nation of Israel. They could care less. And yes, it has changed in evangelicalism, and you're going to watch. It's going to change even more. And the old guard, where that Israel could rely on the evangelicals, is waning. We still have a remnant, but that group is getting smaller and they're getting older. But the youngers are not following in our footsteps.
That's right. I was raised replacement theology and have since changed my mind, but there are two verses I can't reconcile or understand. Can you explain Romans 2:29 and Philippians 3:3? So Romans 2:29 says, he is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is of the heart, in the spirit, not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that you have to understand is what is Paul referring to? And he's talking in that chapter 2 about Jews, the moralists that say they're moral, and so he's talking about the Jewish moralists. So again, he'll make that point in chapter 9. Not all of Israel is Israel. You got to make sure you understand what he's saying. Is that there are with Israel there are remnant Israelites and then non-remnant Israelites that are Jewish. Okay, but the concept though is in the family of faith, in which Abraham is the father of that family. You enter in by faith, and that includes Jews and Gentiles of the same, of the same way through faith. And so what he's trying to point out to them is not that we Gentiles are overtakers or we become the new Jews. It's that we enter into this whole new covenant by the same token, by faith, and so does the Jews. And then he explains this in chapter 11. To where, look, man, you Gentiles have been grafted in now. You're grafted in, but you do not support the root. The root supports you. And he's referring to the Abrahamic covenant. And what we partake in is the new covenant aspect, okay? And how we do that is by faith. So what tends to happen is this gets muddied up. And then people start taking Romans chapter 2 or whatever and saying, yeah, that means we're the new Jews. And he's not talking about that at all. He's talking about how we approach the salvation, and it is by faith. So the Jewish moralist who thinks he's moral enough and keeps the law and that makes him saved is dead wrong. And that was the problem. Paul said in 9, the Jews try to achieve righteousness by works of the law. And that's not how you do it. So anyway, there's partly a reason, an answer for that. And
Philippians 3:3. We are the circumcision who worship God in the Spirit, rejoice in Christ Jesus, and have no confidence in the flesh.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not really understanding the question on that one.
Well, I'm going to guess the answer would go the same path you already went. This isn't saying that the Gentiles become the new Jews. It's, Paul is referring. Paul goes through and lists what kind of a Jew he is, but he says, beware of the dogs, beware of evil workers, beware of the mutilation. He's talking about people that think they're going to be a saved Jew because they're circumcised. He says, no, the real circumcision is the circumcision in the heart.
Yeah, and circumcision of the heart is another way of being born again. That's the Jewish way of saying being born again, is circumcision of the heart, because something has to die. Something has to be gone in order for the new heart to be revealed. You have to cut the old flesh off, and so it's the concept of being born again. Something has to be made alive. Well, anyway, that being the case, just because we have a heart change, or just because we are born again, doesn't change us into Jews.
That's right.
It changes us into the family of God. There's no doubt about that. But you got to be careful about not crossing that line and saying, I'm the new Israel or I'm the new Jew. You're not. You're in the family of God. That's why he says in John that, we have been made children of God. Okay.
That's right.
We are part of the family of God, but you understand God has differentiations in his family. This is why, like in the New Jerusalem, the differentiation is actually kept distinct. Think about this. New Jerusalem, the gates are named after the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay. So there's a distinction there, but the foundations are named after the 12 apostles. So what's the distinction? It's the distinction between the church and Israel, and it's kept in all eternity. And so the family of God includes two vehicles and two mechanisms, obviously, the church and Israel. And so those things are kept distinct. So it's the family of God, but he has distinctions. Let's put it that way. He has distinctions in his family.
Amen. Well, brother, we've finished up the questions. So
okay.
You have a closing word of encouragement for
those
listening?
These are times of testing, and I can tell you this, guys. You've got to know your scripture. You've got to know what you stand on, because more tests are coming. Right now, the test is Israel. Then after that, it's going to be the test of a digital currency. Then after that, it's going to be the test of the LGBT and all this other stuff. And here's what we have to do. We have to stand fast, hold of the word of God, and pass these tests, because what you're going to see is people failing the tests. And this is the sifting of the church that's starting to happen. And so prepare yourself. You're going to see a lot more. So make sure you're in the word, man.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I want to thank my moderators for doing such an outstanding job once again. And we'll see you. For those of you that are going to tune in on Friday for the Revelation Bible study, Lord willing, we'll do chapter 14. Brandon, thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Thank you, my friend. Always good to be with you.